Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco's in the house today. We'll take a look at a little draft from him as we are 3 weeks to the day, Thursday, April 27th. We're going to be live at Maynard's in Margate for the draft show. Pick your trip. If you are our lucky winner, you get an opportunity to pick your Eagles road game in Washington or New York. I want to congratulate our latest qualifiers, Johnny in Ocean City, Corey in Egg Harbor Township. You are this hour's qualifiers. We'll do it again in the 4 o'clock hour. So if you did not qualify yet, you still have more opportunities to do so. And we'll have that coming up right here on the Sports Bash. Don't forget, that's thanks to our friends at Philly Sports Trips. Andrew DiCecco is in the house. We are 3 weeks to the NFL draft. And, of course, a lot of conversation, a lot of visits going on. So let's get some takes from you. What's going on, Andrew DiCecco? How are you, my friend?
Mike, what's going on, man? I'm doing well. Counting down the days until the draft.
We are counting down the days. Now, I told the people the last time you were on, our draft show is at Maynard's in Margate, a great local establishment, and I said that I would verbally invite you to be a part of our draft show. So if you are available, you are more than welcome to be a part of the show on the draft day, my friend. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but I know the people would love a full day of DiCecco.
Appreciate that. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll let you know as we get in within a week out and see what my schedule looks like. But that would be a lot of fun. I'd love to be there.
Yeah, we do a fun time draft party, and of course we talk a lot of drafts. So let's get into some things right now. Joey Porter Jr. They're going to visit with him, according to some reports. A lot of people very interested in him. He's a Penn State guy, so I think he gets a little bit more fanfare around here. But Witherspoon, Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr. kind of size up your thoughts on the cornerback class, and if the Eagles, were to take Porter, would it be at 10? Is that a trade back situation? How do you kind of look at what their meeting with him is all about?
So with Joey Porter Jr., Mike, that would be a trade back situation. In my opinion, taking him at 10 would be very high and really rich. I'm considering that Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez, I have them rated significantly higher. With them probably still being there on the board, it would be a little bit more of a perplexing pick, in my opinion. But that all that being said, I like Joey Porter's tape quite a bit, and I thought that he doesn't have a whole lot of turnover production, but he gets his hand on a lot of footballs. He's very physical, which is what you want, and he's unafraid of any receiver, and he's equipped to handle receivers of all shapes and sizes. Very fluid. And a competitive player, physical, kind of along the lines of Christian Gonzalez. I think he's very physical down the field as well. I don't think that would be a wise pick at number 10, but I think that they could certainly trade down and grab him, and while picking up additional assets.
Yeah, when you look at this cornerback class, they have 1, 2, and 3. I think, is it those 3 and then everybody else? I mean, is corner a spot the Eagles even need to address, in your opinion? Not only in this draft, but, I mean, if they took a corner in the first round, is that a wise decision with what they have?
It's a great question, Mike. And I'm in my school of thought is, yes, they should, if a good one is available and they see fit to do so, because Greedy Williams, everyone's putting all their eggs in the Greedy Williams basket, and he, in theory, would be the first outside corner to step in should Bradbury or Slay have to miss any time. But it's a shot in the dark with him, right? I mean, he's been very up and down throughout his career. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. So you hope that materializes and then that signing works out, but that's far from a guarantee. I think that if you have an opportunity to add a young corner that can start for your football team in a year or two, and he can play in sub packages as a rookie, contribute on special teams. You look at what Lito Shepard and Sheldon Brown did back in 2002. They were waiting in the wings so that when Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor moved on, they had adequate replacements. You don't want to have to go into next season or the next draft, feeling like, okay, we need to get 2 corners to prepare for the future. I think if the opportunity presents itself, I think it would make a lot of sense to grab one.
You take a look at where they sit at number 10 right now. We kind of hinted at a couple things. Let's throw a couple hypotheticals your way in terms of the quarterbacks. You start to hear Hendon Hooker's name now come into the conversation. That would be a fifth quarterback that possibly would be in a first round. But let's say 3 go off the board before Philadelphia picks. And now there's a quarterback on the board at number 10. I'm not asking if the Eagles would consider a quarterback at 10, but would their phone start ringing, and would that be a best-case scenario if a quarterback is on the board when it's their turn to pick?
Yeah, absolutely. That's gonna push. That opens up a whole bunch of optionality for the Eagles. But I have this sneaky suspicion that Jalen Carter is going to slip a little bit in the draft. I think there will be an early run on quarterbacks, possibly even 4, if you can imagine that. I think there's going to be a team that becomes really enamored with Anthony Richardson and his intangibles and his velocity and all those good things. And also, you look at some of the offensive tackles. To me, Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, those are guys that you throw in there. Maybe a corner like a Christian Gonzalez. But all of a sudden, it starts to, Tyree Wilson, the pass rush. All of a sudden, you start to see an opportunity and that Jalen Carter could potentially be available at 10 or at least within striking distance, right? So I think 7 or 8, if he's still there, I think if you're the Eagles and you have a chance to add, in my opinion, the best player in the draft, you have to get him because he's an instant, plug-and-play guy. He's going to be the face of your defense. He would, in theory, be for years to come. And I think that it's a realistic possibility that he could be there or available realistically for the Eagles when they're on the clock.
Yeah, Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 from InsideTheBirds.com. One of the things, this team, you take a look at different mock drafts around. Todd McShay the other day, Lucas Van Ness. He also had them going with another defensive end at number 30, Will McDonald the fourth. You take a look at that possibility. 2 defensive ends in round number 1. Do you like Van Ness at number 10?
No, not at all at number 10. I think that would be a trade back in somewhere around the 15 to 17 range for him. Will McDonald right around 30 would be an appropriate spot for him, in my opinion. So I think that would be feasible and a good pick for the Eagles at that point. But I think if they like Van Ness, I think that would warrant a trade down, taking him at 10. They always say take the player that if you really like the player, you don't wait. But I think that he's a player that you can afford to trade back and still be able to get.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people don't know a lot about Van Ness, but, correct me if I'm wrong, he never started a game in college, right? He's a guy who was a situational player and never actually started a game for Iowa.
Yes, that's true. And he's just one of those, you look at him, he's a strong player, bendy, and but you wonder where his upside ultimately is. And I think when you're looking at a position that the Eagles are in right now at the 10 spot, if you're going to take somebody at 10 at pass rusher, I think you want to take a Nolan Smith who has the enticing traits, explosive edge rusher, and can really give you a new dimension and then can actually complement what you already have there in your stable of pass rushers. I don't know that Van Ness is somebody that's going to ultimately stand out from the pack or really be a big time contributor, which is really what you want when you're selecting essentially a blue chip prospect. And I don't know that he's that.
I'm glad you brought blue chip prospect up. In Europe, I know we always want the first round pick to play. But last year they drafted a guy and they traded up to 13 to get, and he was a rotational player at best last year. I'm not saying that's all he is. Might be all he is. But if you have the 10th pick in this particular draft with what you know about the talent here, if they took a guy at 10, is he a guy that, the Eagles need to make sure is on the field, day one starter?
Well, ideally, but we even mentioned corner earlier. Obviously, if they draft a corner at 10, they're not going to see the field. Their pathway to playing time is probably going to be in 2024 or 25. So I think they need to take the best player available. And I know that sounds cliche, but when you look at Jordan Davis, they already had Hargrave and they had Fletcher Cox there. But you look at the measurables and the upside with somebody like a Jordan Davis, and they were looking towards the future with that pick, and he was just so tantalizing athletically that you had to find a way to get him on your team. You know how much the Eagles really covet defensive line depth, particularly along the interior there. So that move made a lot of sense. Corner is not a position that the Eagles traditionally really covet early in drafts, right? So I don't know that would be a situation there. But you look at somebody maybe like a Pete Skoronsky from Northwestern, the offensive lineman there. They obviously like offensive linemen. Obviously, he wouldn't play right away, but he is a tremendous player that has all-pro ability. So that's a player that you could see them maybe trade down to maybe 12 and grab a player like that. But I think that ideally you want them to be an early contributor because they need some help there from depth and youth.
Well, I know you talked about best player available, so if you're on the board at 10, the best player available when you pick will be
Bijan
Robinson, right? I mean, there's no question, right? I mean, he's going to be the best player available on every draft board, almost when every team picks, outside if you're in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but by definition, he would be the best player available. But then you wonder if the Eagles would just consider trading down if they see somebody. I just can't see them taking a running back at 10. Now, if for some reason Bijan Robinson slipped a little bit in the draft, which we've seen talented players countlessly do that year after year, I could see them maybe being aggressive and maybe trading up from 30 to make sure that they secure him. But that would be a luxury addition, right? I mean, they need a running back, but that would be an irresponsible allocation of resources, in my opinion. I think offensive line or defensive line would be far more realistic if you're the Eagles.
Yeah, I agree with you. By the way, I agree. They're not taking a running back at 10. I'd be pretty shocked. But you do agree that he would be the best player available, and then they would have a decision to make whether or not they want to just, say, hey, we have 2 picks. We have a luxury pick. Let's take a luxury player. Or
right,
how far back do we need to go if we like this player, he's the best player available on our board, but we'll take him at 20.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think if he was there at 20, I think the Eagles would trade up to get him. But you could also possibly stand pat and grab a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama at pick number 30, who obviously isn't the 3-down running back. I don't envision him to be, at least, that Bijan Robinson is. He sort of reminds me of a little bit of an Alvin Kamara type of player, maybe a little bit less of a someone that can shoulder a workload like Kamara can. But there's running backs. I mentioned Tank Bigsby last week from Auburn that you could probably get in the 3rd round. There are talented running backs that they can get. However, there's a big drop-off in some of the other positions that we've talked about.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. A lot of draft conversation here. You take a look at, you mentioned, Bijan Robinson. Obviously, that's a luxury pick here. But where they like to go is on the lines. If there's an offensive lineman at 10, who's your favorite? Because we've heard a bunch of different things. Most of the time, the name that comes up is Peter Skoronsky. Is he your favorite if they took a lineman in that 10 spot?
Yeah, Pete Skoronsky, absolutely. I really like. I mean, obviously, he was a blindside protector at Northwestern, but that wouldn't be what he would be asked to do at the pro level. He's always 6'4", 315, which it sounds enormous, but from NFL standards, that's not. So I think that he would be a right tackle at best, but probably his home would be inside at guard, where his short arms wouldn't necessarily be such a detriment. And he's just a powerful player, really technically savvy. He has Eagles written all over him. I mean, when you look at what he brings from an intangible standpoint, I think that would not be a reach. I think anywhere from 10 to 13 would be right where I kind of have him slotted. And you know how the Eagles covet their offensive linemen. That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I talked earlier. We asked this question yesterday. I want to get your opinion on it. Right now, they've got Nakobe Dean and Nick Morrow at linebacker. Which area still needs more improvement, linebacker or safety?
Wow. Well, I would probably be inclined to tell you that linebacker, because when you look at what the Eagles gave, when you look at Nick Morrow's signing, his contract, I mean, he has zero guaranteed money. And for a player that is essentially penciled in right now to start, I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot of confidence or, sort of exuberance that he's really going to step in there and be the linebacker that he was in Chicago last year, which numbers tell you that he was a terrific player coming off a career season. But when you look at it, I mean, they signed 2 different linebackers, right? TJ Edwards and I'm forgetting the other one, but they in free agency to replace Nick Morrow, who would have been much more of a cost-effective option. I think that the numbers can be misleading, and they are in this case. So I think that when you look at it, they only really have one bona fide starting linebacker, and that's Nakobe Dean. And he's only played 34 snaps at the pro level. Beyond him, I do like Christian Ellis quite a bit. I know the Eagles do as well, but he's more of a special teams maven right now, and you like his speed and what he can bring. But you don't want to pencil him in and as a third linebacker or a starter. Certainly, you want him to earn more of a depth role. But until you see something, you can't necessarily count on that. So there's not much there. Sean Bradley's a special teams standout, but not much more than that. So I think that linebacker is more of a weak point than safety.
Yeah, we'll look at and we know the Eagles. They took Dean last year in the third round, and I would imagine he's going to be on the field regardless. We'll see if Morrow is in the plans or not. Do they make another move to try to do something at the linebacker spot? Do we think they have another move at the safety spot, or are they going to go in with what they got? Blankenship, Wallace, and Terrell Edmonds.
I think that you could see them maybe grab a safety with their second round pick at 62. It's kind of hard for me to envision the Eagles going forward with Terrell Edmonds, he's a nice player, but certainly not a difference maker. He's a steady player. You really know what he is. He's a little more than a replacement level starter. Reed Blankenship is best equipped to be a third safety in the league. He is very limited athletically, and I think that even playing with two standout corners, that might not be enough to mask some of his coverage deficiencies, and you're going to see a lot of teams look to pick on him. But I think he's great as a third safety, great story of development. I think the Eagles really like what they have there, want to continue to mold him, but I think throwing him in there as a starter would be detrimental to his growth and progression. So I think that there's still going to be a move there. Justin Evans is a player who has really intriguing upside, but has essentially missed the better part of 3 seasons. So he's certainly not a lock to even make the team. But I think if he is, you have an interesting player there. But there's just too much question marks. Kayvon Wallace is not a lock to make the team. So I think that there will be another move made to secure the safety position.
That's something, we'll they did it last year. Not that means it doesn't mean because they did it last year they'll do it again. But they did add Chauncey Gardner-Johnson really late into the game. So we'll see if they do something like that. And I feel like they always seem to have that move up their sleeve. And then next year, they're going to have a plethora of draft picks. Now, they're not going to know where those draft picks are until a little bit down the road, but they might be more inclined to trade some of the picks that they currently have, knowing they're going to get replenished. So keep that in mind there. Andrew, obviously, defensive, we know the lines. We talked about the offensive line, defensive tackle. We talked about Lucas Van Ness. But are you comfortable with where they are on the defensive line right now in terms of the ends with Sweat, an older Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett right now would kind of be your third guy, and then, of course, you have, whatever you want to call Reddick as kind of an edge rusher guy. But is that an area where if they don't take a guy like Van Ness in the first round, they have to get more depth at that position?
Absolutely, and that's where it becomes tricky, right? Because as of right now, and I don't think it's going to stay this way, the Eagles only have 6 picks. They need another linebacker. You need a third receiver. You need a safety. You could probably use another corner who we talked about. Like there's a laundry list of positions in which they really could stand to add. But really, they're going to have to really prioritize how they want to do this. And I think that they really do need to add a pass rusher here, especially when you look at Josh Sweat really being the lone young building block that they really have there to build around. And I think that obviously Hassan Reddick had a tremendous season, but Brandon Graham's older. You don't want to necessarily count on Derek Barnett. Obviously, he's coming off a severe injury. So I think you need to bolster that by adding a young player. Just a question of where. I think maybe 30. We talk about Will McDonald. That would be a good spot to do it. But I guess we're going to have to see.
The couple guys that came in this past week that met, Contavious Street, you wrote about him over at InsideTheBirds.com. And, he's an interesting guy in terms of you just said, hey, let's flip over the bubblegum card. The guy's had like 7 sacks. He's got some pressure, but he's always been a rotational guy. How do you see him fitting in here?
Yeah, Contavious Street's interesting. They actually announced the signing 3 minutes or so after you and I got off the phone. But he was a player that I actually tweeted about in the early stages of free agency saying that, I mentioned Contavious Street and Rasheem Green, the defensive end from the Texans, as 2 under-the-radar defensive linemen that had some upside, and I was curious as to where they were going to go. Obviously, Contavious Street landed in Philadelphia. He's an interesting player. Obviously, struggled with injuries for much of his career. He tore his ACL at a private workout with the New York Giants entering the 2018 draft. But that even that couldn't stop him from being. He was a fourth-round pick, but he was a very highly touted player coming out of NC State. A little bit smaller. He's 6'2", 287, but I think he provides a quality that the Eagles really lost. And I'm not equating him to Javon Hargrave at all, but they really need someone that can push the pocket from the interior, and I think he, in theory, provides that. Now, he's certainly not a lock to make the team either. I think he best slots in as the fourth tackle, but he played 46% of the snaps last season for the Saints, which is a career high. So that tends to suggest that maybe he's turned the corner and he's sort of becoming the player that many envisioned when he was drafted.
Right, and Marcus Mariota met yesterday. Obviously, he says, hey, I'm here to help out Jalen Hurts. He wants to be a starter somewhere down the line. But if Jalen was, God forbid, to get hurt for an extended amount of time, are they better with Marcus Mariota, or did they have a better situation with Gardner Minshew?
I think Mariota, it gives the Eagles a little bit more of a boost from the backup quarterback spot, if not only for playing style, right? But I think that the situation in Atlanta was interesting and unique. It might even suggest that Mariota doesn't have anything left in the tank. And I'm not suggesting that he is suddenly a top-flight quarterback, but I think right now you can make a case that he's probably among the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL, given experience, given athleticism, what he can provide to a room, especially pertaining, including a young quarterback like Jalen Hurts. Just his experience alone, I think, is going to be very essential to Jalen's growth, and what he, maybe he sees things differently on the field, and he can really be an extension of the coaching staff on the field. And I think that's a really good signing, and it's going to pay dividends, even if he doesn't have to see the field, which obviously in Philadelphia you hope that he doesn't.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, we are 3 weeks to the NFL draft, and of course more will happen between now and then. We'll have it all right here on Football at 4. You can follow Andrew. Now I see you got a new Twitter handle. You've changed it from A DiCecco NFL. It's now
it was one of those things where I have been looking for years to see if the Andrew DiCecco handle was available. And I kept searching, and somebody had it. And then one day, I guess shortly after the Super Bowl, it was available, and I snagged it.
So it's now Andrew DiCecco. No A DiCecco NFL. It is now at Andrew DiCecco. So now give him a follow there. And, of course, Thursday right here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, man, we'll talk to you.
Anytime, Mike. Take care.
There's Andrew here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. And the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.